To the Calvin Forum. My name is Bob Meyering. I'm an employee here at Calvin College with the Calvin Accelerated program. I'm also a minister in the Christian Reformed Church and upon occasion host this program. Thank you for watching. We have a very special guest today, someone visiting Grand Rapids who agreed to visit with us and to meet on Calvin Forum, and that is Frank Schaeffer. Welcome, Frank.
Nice.
Frank is an author. He is a movie director, and perhaps the name will also suggest your father, who was Francis Schaeffer. Noted apologist for evangelical Christianity.
Yeah, I think that'd be a fair title.
Right. But today we're going to begin with a good story, one that has intrigued me as I've learned more about it from the books you have written and so forth. Let's mention the books. The latest one was Dancing Alone, published by
Holy Cross Press.
Holy Cross Press, and prior to that was a novel, Portofino.
That's right.
By Macmillan Press.
Yep, published by Macmillan.
And those have been in the last couple of years. The story we want to hear about is Frank's journey from growing up as an evangelical Christian under a father who was a Presbyterian minister.
That's right, yeah.
And did he found L'Abri? Was that?
Yes.
He began that work in
He and
Switzerland.
my mother, Edith Schaeffer, began that work together back in 1954.
Sure.
So.
And someone growing up that way today is a Christian in the Orthodox tradition, the Eastern Orthodox Church, and we want to find out how all of that happened. I might simply be able to say, tell us about it, and that'll take care of the show. I don't know. But
well, probably
where does
will.
it all begin?
It's a long story.
Yes.
Well, you know, as you mentioned, I grew up in L'Abri in Switzerland with my father, Francis Schaeffer, and my mother, Edith. My whole childhood memory is one of being in a Christian community that took its faith very seriously. So obviously my own journey from that evangelical Protestant background into the Eastern Orthodox Church, I joined the Greek Orthodox Church in 1990, was not a lightly undertaken matter. I come from a family that took ideas seriously and the idea of Christian truth in particular very seriously. So my journey kind of began, I suppose, accidentally, if you want to use that term. I guess
or
we as Christians don't.
Yes.
Yeah, we as Christians don't believe in accidents, but there are some folks who, from a Protestant point of view, might not think it's providential. So I didn't want to use that word either. They might not like it.
Sure.
But I really was not looking for the Orthodox tradition. What I was looking for was the historical church, because I became increasingly dissatisfied over the years with, I guess, two things. One was my own spiritual progress or lack thereof. In a journey toward Christ, I suppose you could put it. And the other was really the state of the Protestant culture here in North America that our evangelical consensus had built, which I felt was had a lot of liabilities. For instance, the pluralism that evangelicals and Protestants have introduced with their 23,000 denominations and even more interpretations of the Bible, I feel led very quickly to the secular pluralism we have around us, where everybody agrees that there are many ways to truth and as it were, no such thing as truth in an absolute sense. So I kind of had a philosophical, intellectual series of questions about our own Protestant history, and I had some personal questions about my own spiritual life. And so I'd started doing something about 12 or 15 years ago that I really had not concentrated on much before, and that is I began to read both church history and what are known as the church fathers, the patristic fathers, the ante-Nicene fathers, people like Irenaeus of Lyon, Polycarp, Ignatius of Antioch, and others.
These would be major Christian thinkers and writers in the first
First and second and third centuries
right.
to start with, and then after that. Actually, right here in this town, Erdmans publishes the definitive English translation of the ante-Nicene
right.
and the patristic fathers in a wonderful set that I think is available for around $250 or something like that. So they shouldn't be hard to get in this area. But I began to read these, and I also started reading some of the ancient histories of the church, for instance, by Eusebius, that was written in the 4th century. He was the first real church historian, in an attempt to try to find if somewhere along the line we Christians had gone a little bit off the rails. And to my amazement, what I discovered was that while there are many different points of view on doctrine, and after all, having grown up Protestant, doctrine and theology is always what we talk about, but church history is actually fairly straightforward and well documented. For instance, just to take one area, there are many different doctrines of the sacraments of communion or baptism. But when you read church history, it becomes evident very quickly that the historical church did not have many points of view on these things, and that when you look at their practices, whether it's from the archaeological records of places like Ravenna in Italy, where you have a 3rd and 4th century baptistry, and you know what they did there, or whether you read the histories of the church like Eusebius's 4th century history of the church, you very soon discover that what the church has always been is not a matter of just subjective opinion. Well, I read this verse that way, or the Lord is speaking to my heart this way, or, you know, my pastor says. It's actually rather objective empirical evidence. And I guess I discovered 3 things basically somewhere in there. One was that to be a Christian it always meant that you believed certain things, which could be summed up, I guess, in the Nicene Creed. The second thing it meant was that you did and did not do certain things. So you could repeat the creed till you were blue in the face, but if you were running an abortion clinic and had run out on your wife and were committing adultery, or if you were you know, abandoning your family, the creed wasn't going to cut it.
To save you, right?
That's right. And then, but the third thing was that I discovered that kind of amazed me from my background, because I knew so little about it, was that the church had always worshipped in a very definite way. And we Protestants, or at least speaking for myself, kind of get the idea that worship is something you make up as you go along. That you do, you know, if you like banging a tambourine, you bang a tambourine. If you want to do cartwheels, do that. If you're Reformed and worship is 4 white walls and a sermon, do that. And spirituality being the feeling you get at the end of the sermon. And no one seems to remember much these days that Christian morality, worship, and doctrine were all one piece of fabric. So I guess for me, it boiled down to this. There came a certain time in reading some church history and talking to people and so forth that I came to realize, I'll put it this way, that if someone from any part of the historical church, let's say a 3rd century Christian from Carthage, and a 15th century Christian from Lyon in France, and a 10th century Christian from Byzantium in Constantinople, had gone to any one of each other's churches with 1,000 years separating them, and thousands of miles as well, and cultural and history and differences and everything, each would have known exactly where they were in the other's service instantly. They not only would have known they were in a Christian church, they would have known where they were in the liturgy. In exactly the same way that when we read in the New Testament that Christ went up to the synagogue, the temple, to pray, he didn't have to have ancient Jewish worship explained to him. He knew where he was. We're told he read the passage for the day, which means we know there was a lectionary or a liturgy, in the sense it wasn't just a free form. It was the passage of the day. Well, similarly, any Christian from anywhere in history until our very recent era could have gone to any other Christian church and known where they were almost instantly within the liturgy. That's how uniform it was. And I think an atheist reading Christian history, whether they believed in Christ or not, would draw the same conclusion. This is just simply the history of the church. Whether Christianity is true or not, of course, is another question. But then I think the reverse is true, and that is you could take any same group of people from the historical church, bring them to almost any Protestant church today, and the amazing thing to realize is none of them would know where they were. They would not see any of the visible signs where they were. I don't know how you are, but I grew up on a little patch of mountainside in Switzerland, and if you're a country boy, I don't know whether you grew up in the country.
I did grow up on the farm, yes.
Okay, well, I'll bet you that if you were dropped blindfold on any corner of that farm, and you took the blindfold off, you'd know where you were.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm over by the big tree that has the
barn is
limb,
that way.
and the swing used to be on this tree, and the barn's over there. You'd be instantly located. All the visible signs would be the same. Well, if you took somebody from the historic church and dropped them into a Protestant church, they would be saying, well, where is the Eucharistic cup? Where's the priest who heard confession last night before anybody could be properly prepared to take communion? Where's the reading of the day? Where are the psalms the church have prayed since the beginning, and before that the Jews prayed in the synagogues? And they would not see these things. So I think when that started to dawn on me, then I began to ask another set of questions, and that simply wasn't, well, what's wrong with my own spiritual life or this culture, but more to the point, A, is there such a thing as the historical church, not a historical church, the church? And B, is it still something you can locate in the 20th century? Is this something I could be part of? Or now has everything become so free-form and so relativistic that I'll never be able to find out, I'll never be able to find a body of Christians who are still worshiping and believing and holding the doctrine of the ancient church. And so then my quest, as it were, changed, and I started really looking for that. And then eventually, that is what led me into the Eastern Orthodox Church, or the Greek Orthodox Church that I became part of.
And
of course,
I want to explore some of that historical development and so forth with you a little later on, but let me come back to a more personal sort of thing now. As you were reading, studying, thinking of this, what was happening in your life? Were you finding people skeptical at what you were saying, or were you talking to people about this interest of yours and this movement of yours, and how did people react? Did they help you? Did they hinder you?
Well, let me put it this way. I think a lot of evangelicals and Protestants are used to themselves taking the mantle of the kind of chosen people, and so they're not going to begin questioning what they take as a self-evident given. And so I don't think people were, I didn't run into any hostility, but I ran into a lot of people who just couldn't understand what on earth I was doing, why I would be interested in this. But you know, like so many things in life, when you start a certain train of thought, the problem is if you ask honest questions, sometimes you really do find answers.
Yes, yes.
And then, of course, the challenge is, well, what are you going to do about this? And for my own thinking,